what he did to start the demise of the union movement in America, and also what he did to the tax code. So the two things we really need to target are to strengthen our labor unions, and we need to increase the fairness of the tax code, which is the opposite of what we've just done under Trump. The Trump tax cut was a tax cut for the wealthy that did little or nothing for the middle class. And in this state, and in California and other blue states, it actually hurt the middle class because it took away the deductibility of state and local income tax. So in terms of legislation, we have to make the tax code fairer. We need not a flatter tax, but a more progressive income tax. And we need to restore unionism in America. We need to stop the trend that's working towards right-to-work laws, and we need to strengthen our labor unions. Part of that is passing fair trade agreements. And I wrote an op-ed piece in the East Hampton Star last week, which you can see and read if you want, and it talks about our trade policy and the effect on unionism. And that's what's really going to have an effect on rebuilding the middle class in America. Thank you.
The problem with this is that when you've heard two good answers, they're part of the answer that you want. Because I believe we have to start with the repeal. You know how the Trump Republicans started with repeal of the ACA? We want to start with the repeal of this horrendous tax act that Ryan is so proud of, and which further divides this country. And that's the beginning. And I agree with what Elaine said about our own economy here in Suffolk County. When I was a legislator, I introduced the green buildings legislation, where all municipal buildings had to be built according to green standards. And so I'm a firm believer that we have to look forward. One of the things that made me decide to run for this seat is because I resented the cynical promise that Trump made to the workers in West Virginia and Pennsylvania and Kentucky that he was going to increase coal mining. That's a technology of 2 centuries ago. We can't promise people this old, dead economy that harms them, that results in black lung, and certainly hurts our environment. We need to look to the future. That's how I will be legislating, looking to the future, finding jobs, and certainly supporting the working people throughout this country, without cynicism. Thank you.
The issue of economic inequality is I think, central to the mess that we're in. It's at the root of the strain on our political and social system. So a member of Congress I want to be a member of Congress that takes it on 2 levels. One is the big picture. So yes, strengthening unions, a fairer tax code, defending Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. All those things are so important. But then, a freshman member of Congress isn't going to change the world overnight. So you're going to have to be part of a coalition of Congress members that are fighting for those things. Then you're also going to have to be someone who's very skillful in working in a practical thing and way and stuff you can get done. So, for example, I've worked in my career in government on affordable housing. There's a housing crisis in this district, in Long Island. And housing is not affordable. I think we all know this, even for people making over $100,000. There should be federal investment in housing for a range of income groups. So young people can stay here, so older people can stay here with their families, young people can raise their families here. So housing is one thing. Transportation, it's also an economic issue. Investment in our public bus system, it discriminates against poor people. It discriminates people that can't afford 2 cars. So you have to look at those things, what you can get done, and there might be smaller things you can done while fighting to take on the big picture and working on rewriting the tax code and changing the politics of this country so we have a fairer and more equal society.
Thank you, David.
Kind of hard to be at the end. However, how many of you pay more than $10,000 a year in your property taxes? I'm sure probably pretty much everyone. So this tax bill, it's only good for 8 years for our working families. That's not right. However, corporations continue to get that tax cut. So we need to make sure there's more fair and equitable tax bill And so that's something that we need to work on. Infrastructure, I talked earlier about some of the infrastructure that I've worked on, the sewer project, and we need to bring in more good jobs so people have good paying jobs. You know, Trump said he was going to have an infrastructure bill in the first year in office. Well, guess what? We never got it, and we're still waiting for it. So that's something I'm going to fight for, is to make sure that we have infrastructure money in place so we can create those good paying jobs, so we can have those water quality projects, so we can move those renewable energy projects. So that's something that I want to continue to work on. And again, let's reform this tax bill, because who's it hurting? Again, it's hurting the working families.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, now I get to ask the follow-up question. In your answers, I heard a lot about infrastructure, I heard renewables, a little bit about housing, young people, earlier answers. In the context of those topics, what is your position on a universal wage? Or some universal basic income? Okay, we'll go in the same order, because otherwise, yes. I'm sorry, this is a 1 minute.
It's such a pleasure to be in a room where the forum was organized by progressives who will just say outright that they want to know what we think about a universal basic income. We are facing the facts that more and more types of jobs can't and shouldn't be done by human beings anymore, and this culture, this country, has to deal with it. How do we make a divided Congress deal with it? I'm going to go into Congress with a proposition to put on the table. There's $3 trillion in the wrong place. Now, there are probably a lot of different members of Congress. Some of them think we should have an earned income tax credit. Some of them think we should change Social Security. Some think that we should change student loans. Some think we should have a more regressive or a more progressive tax law. I'm going to pull for that $3 trillion to come down. Now, $3 trillion is $800 a month for everyone 18 and over who's a U.S. citizen. So that's my magic number for a universal basic income. It's $800 a month. It's $3 trillion. We have to move it by whatever means necessary.
Thank you, Elaine. Colin? Sorry, Perry, I'm sorry.
All right. Call me pretty much anything except
No,
Lee Zeldin. So, in terms of a basic income, we need to take care of Americans, and within the constraints of what we can get through in Congress, it's a great idea. Certainly a $15 minimum wage nationally is a great idea, and that's a start along the way towards a basic living wage for everybody. In terms of specifics, as David said, as a first-year congressman, it's not something we can get through, but it's something we should talk about. It's something we should put in the national dialogue. That's how we move forward as Americans. You're not going to accomplish everything on day one, but if you introduce it into the dialogue, you make progress, and hopefully eventually you get there. That's the way healthcare has gone. We started talking about national healthcare, then we got the ACA, and hopefully pretty soon we'll have Medicare for all. Thank you.
Thank you. Perry.
Again, I agree with Perry regarding starting with the 15-hour living wage, because that's what you have to start with, having a living wage for everybody who works. And I enjoy listening to my companions here on the stage, because it reminds me of things that, not that just that I will promise you, but things that I've already done. I was on the Workforce Housing Commission here in Suffolk County and worked very hard helping people to get affordable housing. I worked with the CDC. As far as infrastructure, I expanded the bus lines in Suffolk County. In fact, I was one of the legislators who rode a bus to work several times to show how difficult it is for people to get from one place to another. Worked very hard on equality by putting together the Welfare to Work Commission, who helped people make their way from welfare to work by helping them with transportation, with child care. You have 2 people in a family working, the cost of child care is tremendous. And when you have a single parent having to do that, it becomes overwhelming. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria.
So the question was about universal basic income.
Yes.
Is it time for us to go for that or consider that? I mean, the economy is not working right. I think we can all agree with that. It hasn't been for a long time, right? The rich are getting richer and not enough people have decent jobs. So I think it is a question, though, about strategy. And so before we even talk about a universal basic income, let's look at the resources that we have. And for me, looking at the budget, I'm someone that's dealt with government budgets a lot and has trained legislatures overseas on that. If you look at the fact that we're spending $700 billion on the defense budget, well, that needs to be cut. It's not making us safer, it's a misallocation. I'm not talking about cutting, I'm for money for servicemen and women. I'm talking about profits for defense contractors and endless war. So if we start by cutting that, then we're gonna have money for other needs. And I think we have to start there and figure out if we're really using the money the right way to begin with, and let's invest the money we do have in human needs.
Thank you, David.
And again, hate to be last, however, let's talk about starting with equal pay for women. Women are still not equally paid. We need to make sure that that's where we start. The $15 an hour minimum wage, absolutely. And you know, I met with some farmers not too long ago who have said that that does have an impact on them. And so when they are seeing that they're forced to do a $15 an hour minimum wage here in New York, but it's not being done in other states, that impacts our local farmers. So we need to make sure if we're going to have a $15 an hour minimum wage, then it should be across the board. And again, let's start equal pay for women.
Thank you, Kate. Okay, next question. Do you think it's time for a leadership change in the Democratic Party? And if so, what changes are necessary? I guess if you say no, then why do you think the current leadership should remain? Harry.
Love going first on that one. So, I came back from a two-day conference in Washington, D.C. this past weekend for J Street. And one of the speakers actually was asked the question, does he think Nancy Pelosi is going to survive as the head of the Democratic Party? And he had an interesting answer, which is, if the Democrats do not take the House, of course she's going to be gone. And I think everyone knows that. If the Democrats do take the House, he expects her to not run because there are too many candidates who are being asked, like we are, would you pledge your support for her? I think my answer is, let's see. And I like Nancy Pelosi. I think she's done a great job. I think it's unfortunate that Republicans have made her a lightning rod of the venom that they like to put at people. But I am not for that. And I do like Nancy Pelosi, and I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry.
Well, I think you're going to see a pattern emerging that we do seem to agree on many issues. The concern that many Democrats have is the way the Republicans are using Nancy Pelosi as a hammer to hit us. They see a blue wave coming and they're trying to find a way to divide us. We have to win the House. We have to win the House with the leadership that is there now. We have to say that we will stick together, work together, but really emphasize our democratic principles of fairness and did you hold up? I thought I saw you holding up. I'm sorry. Okay. Anyway, I don't want to start talking about a coup regarding Nancy Pelosi. I really respected her when she voted against going to Iraq. That took courage. But if it's time for new leadership, then when I get to Congress, I'll work with my colleagues and see who we want to elect.
Thank you very much.
Is the question about Nancy Pelosi or about the party?
No, it's about the party. It's not just Nancy.
That's what I thought. So I think the Democratic Party does need to change. I think the party is too tied to corporate donors. It's failed to distinguish itself from the Republican Party enough, particularly on the issue of foreign policy. If the party continues, the party failed us and failed on the issue of Iraq. Too many Democrats voted for that war. It's put us in a huge hole. It's the debt service on that war alone is $8 trillion through 2050, and it squeezes everything else we want to do as Democrats, the values that we say we should stand for. So yes, if I'm in Congress, I want to be a member of the Progressive Caucus. Look it up, Google it, you'll see the members. Those are the Democrats that I think are on the right path, that are going to lead this country in a better direction.
Thank you, David.
Okay, should there be a change? I don't think anything should not be up for grabs. I was a Suffolk County legislator. I was term limited. So should term limits be considered for the leadership in the Democratic Party? I think absolutely that should be taken into consideration. So when I go to Congress, certainly I want to work with my colleagues, all of my colleagues in the Democratic Party, to consider should we change the leadership. And I'm very open to that. And again, I would certainly encourage a possibility of term limits on leadership.
Thank you, Kate.
Here's what I want to see in the leadership of the Democratic Party. I want to see fearlessness. I want to see a fearless statement of principle in the party, and for each individual in Congress, I want that to see a fearless statement of what they think is the right approach when there is a problem to be solved. That's what I think voters need to respond to. They do not want to be cynical, and we won't be cynical if we see fearlessness in our leaders. When I look at the folks who have been in Congress for such a long time, we know they have a legacy of taking a stand, and we also know they have a legacy of compromising when they knew that that would move things forward. And it's when they stop being fearless and they start to be afraid of what they'll do for their own re-election instead of doing what's right, then we will change the leadership because they will lose the primaries.
Thank you, Erin. I have a follow-up question on this because part of leadership is message. And there's a couple polls that have come out recently, and I don't put a lot of faith in some of these, and so they're all over the place. But they're saying that Democrats have lost the edge on the economy, even though the tax law becomes hugely unpopular. What messaging are we missing? Where are we going wrong as Democrats on this message when we have this unpopular tax cut, but yet the polling now is trending that the Republicans have an advantage on the economy? That's a 1-minute answer on this.
Sometimes when you don't like the question, you attack it, and I actually challenge that question. I don't think that polling shows that the country has lost faith in the Democratic message. I think we have a diverse message, so it's a little bit hard to analyze. What's the right message in Suffolk County is not the same as what the right message is in Northern California or in Georgia or in Alabama. What worked for Doug Jones is not going to work here in New York, and it's certainly not going to work in Northern California, San Francisco. The Democratic message is a diverse one, but I think the Democrats stand for the working people and the working class people of America, pretty much across the board, and we need to reinforce that. So maybe the Democrats aren't communicating their message perfectly, but they do have the right message, and we just have to keep beating the drums and making sure people hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry.
Actually, what the Republicans did with that tax bill was to start with what looked like a cut for the middle class. But as their benefits diminish, the corporate benefits increase at an exponential rate. So they're fooling the people in the short run. In the meantime, I don't agree with the poll, because I'm seeing people across this country, particularly teachers, saying we are workers, we want to be paid what we should be paid, we want our schools to have the services that they should have. The classrooms are falling apart, the kids have no books. Teachers are an important workforce who are taking the reins and carrying the democratic message that we have to educate our children, we have to pay our workers fairly, and that's what will carry the day. As Democrats, we have to continue to support that message.
Thank you, Vivian.
So I think this goes back to what I said. I mean, it's hard to claim the mantle of the party of the people when you're taking so much money from corporations. There's a conflict there. And so the Democratic message needs to be much stronger in terms of saying we are the party. We are truly the party for working people. We're the party for fairness. We're the party for all working people. And if we don't do that, we're going to continue to lose. And I think that whether you like him or not, Bernie Sanders showed a path for a strong message about the economy, about fairness, and that we need to learn from that, or we will continue to lose. We have to be a lot stronger, a lot more principled, and not be tied to corporate donors.
Thank you.
I think there has been a bit of a message mishap there. The Democrats are the party of the working families, and the message does seem to have gotten lost. I mean, when we see that Trump won by 16 points. However, the Republicans have defunded the National Labor Relations Board. We also have the Janus decision coming up, which is an anti-union bill. And that's something that's going to hurt working families throughout the country. So this is something that the Republicans have done. So we need to make sure that that message gets out. That it's not the Democrats doing this. This is the Republicans who are doing this. And then look at the tax bill that we have right now that's hurting working families. So we need to make sure we do a better job of messaging that it's not the Democrats, that this is the Republicans who are attacking our working families in the middle income.
Thank you.